Welcome back to What They Don't Teach You in School, where we teach life. My name is Donnie Thomas, and today we're going to be discussing forgiveness. More specifically, some strategies for forgiveness. Now, why is this important? This is important because we've been talking about emotional state and the power of emotional state in propelling you to meeting your goals. When we talk about your positive emotional state, the more positive your emotional state, the more likely you are to accomplish things. The more negative you are with your emotional state, the less likely you are to accomplish things. So everything that we're doing is to drive back to the positive emotional state, both in the personal and the professional life, because both lives intersect. And a lot of times we try to separate the two because we believe that I just leave everything at work or I leave everything at home. No, your emotions come with you when you go to work. Your emotions come with you when you go home. So making sure that you are constantly in a positive emotional state allows you to realize the benefits that you want to see in your personal life as well as your professional life. Now, how do we define forgiveness? Forgiveness is defined as a conscious and deliberate release of feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or group who's harmed you. Now, when I look at this definition, there are a few words that stick out to me. Conscious, deliberate, release, resentment, vengeance, and harm. Now, let's look at conscious and deliberate for a quick second. That signals to me that there is some work that needs to be done. There's no sitting back and allowing time to heal all wounds. Although time may heal your wounds, when you're met with that same situation or scenario or person in the future, that same negative emotion is going to come back because you haven't truly forgiven them. When you truly forgiven someone or a situation, when you see them, you have no negative emotion attached to them. Now, when we talk about release, that's because you've released that negative emotion. Now, why don't we want to release that emotion? I thought about that. Why don't we want to release that emotion? And I arrived at a few things. Number one, we don't want to release the emotion because we believe that that emotion protects us from future scenarios that might resemble that scenario. And number two, we don't want to release it because we still hold resentment and we want to see the other person or the other group experience the same level of pain and trauma that we experience. But in the end, inevitably, that won't solve our immediate issue or your immediate issue because you'll still have the issue regardless of whether or not that person is hurting or not. That brings me to the resentment and the vengeance. That's just making someone pay for what they did to you. You want to make them pay. But then what? Then what? Yes, they've harmed you. But then what if you retaliate? And the question is, how are you retaliating? Are you retaliating to correct the situation and put yourself back into a positive emotional state? Or are you retaliating to put the other person in a negative emotional state? All right. And the last word I mentioned was harm. It could be physical, mental, or emotional. They're all different types of ways that people or situations can harm you. Physically, there could be a scenario where you're in a scuffle or whatever the situation may be. You may be in a car accident. Mentally, someone could say something that just has your mind blown. And ultimately, it's going to impact you emotionally. And it's going to make you feel a way. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be negative. Whether it be sadness or anger or going back to the resentment. Now, let's address this who, because most of us, when we think about forgiving, we point our fingers at everybody else. This person did this. This group of people said that. But we tend to miss the most important person, which is ourselves. There are going to be many times when you experience a harm and you're more mad at yourself than the other person. I know for me, I tend to be more mad at myself because I allow myself to make certain decisions, and which is why when I am in scenarios where I believe someone else has harmed me, I try to look at what I've done to create the environment that allowed me to be harmed. Because first I have to forgive myself for allowing that to happen. And that's the first strategy. The first strategy is identifying what you need to forgive yourself for. What is it that you're struggling with right now? Whatever it is. Whether or not it's something that somebody else is doing to you or has done to you. What do you need to forgive yourself for? The second thing, when I'm encountering situations where somebody has done something to me, for example, in real estate, I've had several instances where I've invested or felt like I've tried to work with certain people who have let me down, not paid rent, skipped out on their obligations. And I had to look at that person and say, that's my tuition. That's my tuition for life. It's the cost of the business. It's the business. And it was that mind shift that allowed me to forgive that person, because that person's just being them. That person's just trying to survive. Not saying that I didn't take them to court. Not saying that I didn't do what I needed to do in order to make myself whole. But I had to look at certain things like my tuition. Now, next, separating the action from the person. The first strategy was about identifying what you need to forgive yourself for. The second one was a mind shift where you're looking at it as life's tuition. When somebody harms you, that's the cost of life. Life it's nothing happening to you. It just happened. And that brings me to the third point, which again is separating the action from the person. It's not that this person hurt my feelings. My feelings were just hurt. This happened and my feelings were hurt. And it's these subtle mind shifts that allow us to start to take back the power, because now I'm not even attaching the emotion with the person. I'm just looking at the behaviors that I don't want to allow into my life. And so when I look at the behaviors, I'm able to acknowledge the behaviors when I see similar behaviors in other people, and I'm able to stop them dead in their tracks. Now, you may not be able to do this 100%. However, when you separate the actions from the person, you begin to identify the types of people and the types of scenarios that you want to allow into your life. So again, I'll recap for some strategies for forgiveness. 1, think about what you need to forgive yourself for. 2, try to shift your mind to think about things as the cost of life, the cost of doing business. To be vulnerable means to open yourself up to the good and the bad. It's the cost of life. It's a natural part of life. And the last part is separating the emotion from the person. Because when you look at the actions or the emotions or actions of the person rather, versus this person did this, you begin to identify patterns and people that don't align with who you are and the environment that you want to surround yourself with. Now with that, I hope that this was helpful, and I will talk to you next time.